Hello. Hi, Samar. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Manish. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for joining in. Welcome to Communicate Karo LinkedIn Live series. Hello.
Thanks. So glad to be here. I've been following your previous interactions and always found it extremely insightful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thanks for agreeing to be part of this Communicate Karo LinkedIn Live series. And in the past, I have been talking to a lot many interesting folks on different issues. And I
I'm
thought that
sure.
this time we have to talk about B2B marketing. It's
Right.
always been a buzzword, but it's more because we have been dealing day in and day out, and you are the right person to talk about this domain. So what I have some questions to ask, and I will keep it as interactive as possible. So those who are joining in, maybe on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter. So briefly about Samar. Samar is head of marketing and growth of Onsurity. Onsurity is India's first tech-enabled employee healthcare platform for emerging businesses. After more than a decade of working and leading marketing, India's major private sector banks, Samar decided to jump onto the startup bandwagon and helping Onsurity, which has made monthly healthcare benefits accessible to employees of SMEs and startups in the country. He's an avid writer. He's focusing on creating innovative brand strategies that will drive growth and bring marketing expertise to enhance the approach and penetration of Onsurity. Summer, once again, welcome for this interaction. And as I mentioned, I find it very fascinating because you moved from banking sector to a completely new sector. So I'm going to ask questions around it. So many of the people who might be having some kind of an apprehension moving from one sector to other,
Sure.
how to survive. है ना? So
No, it's a very interesting thing. I always believe that people should keep reinventing themselves, and in today's entire ecosystem of things happening, moving from corporate or the conventional corporate to a startup life was quite a change. And but I believe both of them had their own pros and cons, and I think people should experience both sides of it.
yes, fantastic. Yes, because first, matlab, I started my career as a journalist, and then I moved to the development sector. So again,
Yeah,
it's tough. It's not easy to get out of your comfort zone and try to do something different. So there's a lot of ups and downs, but good to know that.
yeah, and also it's like you said, no, we all love to unlearn and relearn and reinvent. If that's inside you and you wish to do that, the thing's difficult then.
Great. So here is my first question, and those who are listening to us on any of the platform, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, please ask questions. We would love to have your questions asked from Summer. So Summer, my first question is, and this is from your LinkedIn profile only, that you talk a lot about brand, culture, empathy, innovation, and customer experience, and something which really fascinates me is about empathy. So, how do you think that any organization can build a culture of empathy? And as you mentioned about the customer experience, does empathy have an influence on customer experience or not? Over to you, sir.
So I'll start. Empathy is more a very loosely used word these days. Like people always try to or interchangeably sometimes use between sympathy and empathy. And when someone asks that you say is that you put yourself in someone else's shoes, and that's the easiest way of explaining empathy to someone. But I typically, whenever I have been practicing the empathy or the culture on empathy, the first and the foremost foundation step of building that culture is listen first and talk later. Empathy can be best practiced by any organization if the basic quality of listening is embedded in the culture of the organization. Thou shall and thou shall not directives are the biggest hindrances to create empathy culture. However, to create an empathy culture, the organization must take the journey of listening to understanding to empathy. It's a journey. It's not that tomorrow you can become empathetic and suddenly you become non empathetic. Like Stephen Covey's, I remember a quote from him that most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. Correct? And that actually is the core of empathy. That always listen to understand the opposite person, what that person is trying to say. Our first reaction is that what do I reply? correct? That little bit of shift is what builds an empathetic culture. If the intent of listening becomes understanding, the intent to practice empathy as a work culture comes to existence organically. It's very natural then for you. You don't have to make so much of stress. And if this culture is developed of listening, the halo effect of listening or empathy enables people of any organization to replicate the same to the outside world. I mean, today we find so many of different people who interact with us, correct? But there are few people whom we love interacting, and there are few who feel irritated. Not that the business knowledge of both of them are very different, but it's that the first person had that little bit of extra moment to give it to you when he was listening to you, correct? They are not only good salesmen, but they're good networkers. They're good, they're good engagers, and they are overall people who represent the brand very positively. The person, the second hand, who's always ready to give solution is the one you typically want to stay away. Not because there's anything bad or ugly about it, but it's just that it is not he's not being able to grasp the intent with which the customer is speaking to to the executive. Hence, the art of listening enables the skill of empathy. Instead of selling your product as is, one has to develop the understanding of the need by listening, and can be, the customization be created on the spot. Like we say, it's consultative selling these days. The core of consultative selling is listening, and that's where the culture of empathy in the organization plays a great role. Manish, I can't listen to you. I think you're on mute.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for highlighting the part of the art of listening. And I think, uh, and because I asked this question, because now when we go and interact with different companies or maybe in outlets, there are some outlets or there are some cafes now where you feel like going again and again. And
Correct.
one of the reason is the experience which we get there.
Correct.
So you rightly mentioned, I think many of the times organization, they don't really work on that part, because again, building an empathy in a culture in an organization is really really tough. It's not easy.
Yeah, and it's not an overnight job. People
Yes,
feel that you get a people and a culture manager, and tomorrow empathy will
yes,
be in the organization. It's not that.
yes,
Like, you have to give space and time for everything to evolve. And that's the basic of brand building, also, right? Brand building is not an overnight job. So
yes,
the foundations are same.
yes. Thank you so much for that very insightful thought and your response. Now coming back to the main topic, है ना, what has really changed in the marketing sector? And I would like to add, because we also have some questions from participant, like Ashleen Kaur. So she has asked, what are the advice to young marketeers? So I would love to club both the questions together. है ना? So what has really changed in the market and what's your advice to young
I mean,
marketers?
I'll take that advice to young marketers a bit in the end. Maybe a lot of
Yes,
things might get covered, in the
yeah,
journey. But would
yes,
love to answer that, maybe in the end if it's not getting covered. And Manish, you
yes.
can nudge me
Great.
there. If you
Yeah,
still
I will
feel
do that.
you need more insights. Okay, I'll take that question on what's really changed in the marketing sector. So for me, uh, there are two big changes which I'm seeing from when I started to what we are doing now and what's going to evolve. Correct. Like I said, that even on a personal level and on a professional level, you try to upskill and unlearn yourself. That's the simple reason. The biggest shift that we have seen, Manish, is you know something we call as OTS, which is opportunity to see, which is versus OTX, which is opportunity to experience. This shift has happened from OTS to OTX. Correct? Consumers are evolving every day and every hour of the day. To keep up the pace with the consumers, one way dialogue of informing the consumers, which is OTS. OTS may you only want them to see you. Correct? It's getting replaced with the first hand experience of the brand. Correct? That's the OTX. I think this shift is changing the dynamics in which brands are getting built, the brands are getting evolved, and the difference between B2B and B2C is, in my view, diminishing, because it is no longer about OTS but about OTX. Correct? Because experience is the common player in both of the segments. The second important change that I'm noticing in the marketing segment, and it's a very it's an analogy by itself, which I feel is using artificial intelligence to understand human intelligence. Correct? Technology implements machine learning. The NLPs make it possible for the marketers to automate customer interactions and give more dynamic and on the go insights. Sentiment analysis, for example, is a process getting widely accepted, where the NLP is used to understand consumer journey on the tone of their sentences. I mean, from the tone, they are able to make out what sort of insights and what sort of the behaviors the consumer is trying to depict while they're dealing with the brand. So it's a very fascinating change. We never had that before, and that's the obvious difference that's coming up. So I think these are two big changes that I'm seeing in the marketing sector.
Uh, Thank you for giving this whole thing now O2S and O2E. It's very fascinating, and
Yeah,
rightly you
O2,
mentioned.
O2S and O2X. X is the experience.
Okay, okay, great, fantastic. And I think you rightly mentioned that the lines are also blurring. And I don't know whether you take a dig at artificial intelligence, that they're trying to understand human intelligence. Uh,
Yeah. So there's so many of them. In fact, right now we are dealing with a company which is auditing our calls. You do the quality analysis of the calls.
okay.
Correct? They are able to give us insights which are insane, which I never had heard in my previous organizations. Uh, like I said, sentiment analysis today all players are giving. I mean, I thought it would be like a USP of few, correct? But it's almost become
Hmm.
generic. That from the
Okay.
way we are speaking, they're able to cull out so many insights. They give you brand scores, they give you service scores, so much basis what the consumer is talking in the tone in which he's talking. I mean, that's so insightful. I mean, so useful. From the brand perspective, from the customer experience level perspective.
Okay, fantastic. So moving to my next question, because marketing and sales is always confused. So what's your thought on this? Is marketing sales or sales is marketing?
Uh, Today there's this new term that's called growth. It's again a
Growth.
very widely and very loosely used term in the startup ecosystem more that I'm a growth manager or I'm
Yes.
a growth leader. So what's
Yes.
ideally a goal growth? If I have to put in a very simple term, every marketer needs to understand the funnel and the business, and every salesperson needs to be the brand ambassador uh, himself. You know, when both of them collaborate is when you have a growth manager, because then you're not thinking in silos. Correct? So
Hmm.
marketing is historically often cited as a gateway to sales. But in modern time, I feel marketing is shifting towards generating experience. And it would not be an exaggeration, like I said, that marketing is sales. If I have to only look from the marketing side, correct? So today, you cannot say that marketing only does advertising and sales does sales. Correct? Today, marketing does amazing sales. And on the other hand, particularly in the service sector, your sales teams are your biggest representation of brand. So you cannot take away the importance of marketing from sales. So I truly believe that line is diminishing day in day out because again the neutralizing factor is the experience and not sales. So when you come to experience, we all talk the same language. I hope, Manish, I'm making
Yes,
some sense on
yes,
the
yes,
question that you
yes, yes,
answered.
yes, yes. You made a lot of sense. Just clicking, coming on the screen, and I think that's why because I also have heard a term called experience design. How can you really bring experience design in whatever you are doing with it, sales and marketing? Because ultimately, people are going to remember their experiences, and maybe that's why, as you rightly said, that things are blurring when you're talking about marketing and sales.
No, absolutely. I mean, you have so many cases today. You like to go to a particular app versus another app only because that app is easy to maneuver, they're easy to access. You love seeing the way interact with you. That's nothing but a cohesive experience design, correct? You have
Okay.
examples like Cred who are leading the way, where sometimes you feel that the design itself is the product for Cred. You know,
Yes.
it's so
Yes.
strong. I mean, it is one of the finest examples of design led business that you can call.
Okay. So now I'm going to take a participant question. Amit Shah has asked this question. B2B marketing requires alignment and trust between inbound and outbound demand generation. How does one achieve this?
Uh, See, the whole thing about, the inbound and outbound and the trust and the alignment that B2B marketing requires is, again, I feel it's a matter of basically push and pull, correct? And today, as a marketer, the role of brand is, that's why, becoming more and more exceedingly important in the B2B business, because it not only helps me create a good experience when it comes to the inbound the demand generation, but it also helps to create that trust when I'm going into the outbound demand generation. And that level of alignment can only happen when brand plays a dual role, correct? Previously you had those situations, and previously you had situations where the inbound was more aligned towards marketing, and outbound was more aligned towards sales. But because that brand is a nutrifier here, and it actually plays a role of balancing both ends. I think that's the change that we are seeing, and I think that's why the focus of brand is increasing more and more into the B2B segment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Okay, okay. So moving to that, now let's also talk about how digital media platforms have impacted B2B marketing. If yes, then how, and how it can be done efficiently. I think one of the participant also asked this question on, there are a lot of tools which are coming, and that's basically creating a lot of FOMO among the marketeers to use the upcoming tools. So how do we see that in this particular context?
So digital as a medium, as a medium defines targeting, measurement and real-time adaptations. Hence, for B2B marketing, digital as a medium becomes a primary ammunition to reach out and render first-hand positive experience to the target audience. Correct?
Okay.
And
Okay.
if I have to take the second part of your question, that how can it be done effectively or efficiently, I would say, before efficiency, which is more like a output, the question has to be about how effectively, because
Okay.
efficiency needs to be measured post the effect has come into play. Correct?
Okay.
And hence, as you said, there's so many tools, there's so many channels, there are various indications or indicatives, as to what should be your input, because finally, in the world of numbers, we are so much output driven that we forget what's the quality of input that's going in. Again, it's very difficult to say which tools and how to select the channel, because it all depends on the objectives of the brand. What are the the intent with which the brand is entering into that particular campaign. A lot of these things determines the selection of a particular tool or a channel. But I think, as my tell it is as I tell my team also, that it's important to first figure out the quality of input rather than focusing on the output, correct? Because that flow of input to output will have a better impact or a bigger impact on the output.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. So you're saying that we should have more quality check in terms of what's going in the system rather than always focusing on the
Yeah, I
output.
mean, it's always inputs that define the output, na? I mean, हम क्या सोचते हैं कि ये number करना है, इतना पैसा है. Finance
Right.
or money can only be one input, correct? But
Okay,
money is not the only input. The role of
right.
design, the role of communication, the role of content, the role of channel selection, the role of tech backing, your funnel makes a lot of impact on the output. So it's very important to figure out the customer journey as a whole than only seeing the end of the journey.
Okay, great. So I have next, I think, leading question to that. So, like for example, if you have to suggest platforms for B2B marketing, and what should marketeers do in advance before planning marketing strategies?
So honestly, there is no thumb rule for this. Like I said, it widely depends on what category of business is in conversation.
Okay,
Most often, platform needs to be created by the B2B brand to break the clutter and engage the target business in much sharper way. See, the biggest problem with B2B is that, sometimes the solutions are very complex, correct? So when the solutions get complex, the rational thinking comes or takes over the emotional thinking. However, we all understand, we all know that, in the end, it's the human who's buying the product, be it for
Yes.
himself or for the business. So it
Yes.
is important that brand balances that role of emotion and rational, when it comes to some of the B2B decision making. So I would not suggest, or I would have a pinpointed answer as to what platform, because it again depends on a very wide scope of things. Correct. What sort of campaign, again? What are the objectives of the campaign? And it would be very unfair for me to name a platform and say कि यही करो तो कुछ हो सकता है. I don't think
Okay.
that that's the way it works, and that's not the way starting point it should be for any B2B marketer.
Okay. But in terms of building a marketing strategy, like you have to suggest, okay, this 1, 2, 3 steps. Ideally, everyone should go about.
So whenever we are building the marketing strategy, the first thing that I go is a very conventional way. Okay, firstly, what's your STP? What's your
Okay.
segment targeting and positioning matrix for you and your brand? Correct.
Okay.
The biggest and the mistake, or the I'm not saying mistake, but some of the things that I observe on the startup side versus the corporate side is, here there's a quick rush for results, which is not bad. Correct. Results are the most important matrix when it comes to measuring the impact, but the methodology, or the process to reach to the result sometimes is very fragmented. Correct. And in that case, you have to reinvent every time you want to do a similar campaign or a larger campaign. So when you're building up a business which is ready for scaling, correct, like Onsurity is now series A, and it's in this phase of scale up. I do not have the time to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Correct. Hence, as a marketing strategy, important to do a STP. Correct. Have your simple, AIDA, the awareness,
Model.
intent, the desire, action model
Interest,
in place.
desire, action. Yeah.
Right? Follow simple steps. There's nothing complicated that anyone needs to perform. Just because you're in a brand team doesn't mean you need to have some big models to figure out what's the brand.
Yes.
Let's do simple first, settle down, build a foundation, and move to the next level. Correct. And I think that works. Particularly, I've seen that whenever we're on the other side of corporates, we were always on the evolved models of working, be it brand or marketing or advertising. But when you have come on the startup side, you sometimes have to go back, go to your foundations, go to your roots, get that right, and then build it on there. Correct. So I think as a startup community who's watching this, keep it simple. Correct. You will be fed with a lot of information. There are a lot of models. No model is right or wrong. Correct. But follow one model, implement it, see the results, and then take on the next model. Correct. Do not try to jumble up with too many graphs and models and XY matrices, because that will just confuse the whole thing. Marketing is not so confusing.
Thank you, Samar. I think that's very, very interesting point. I like to re-emphasize what you say, that at the end of the campaign, any of the campaign, there is going to be a humans, and it's all about emotion. So I really love that particular sentence, a particular thought, because at the end, whatever we are doing, we are actually interacting at the end with humans only.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
tech is an enabler. Tech is a great enabler.
Uh,
It helps you to interact with lot many
yes.
humans at a go. But in the end, it
Mm.
will be that human interaction which is going to make a difference in the tech world. I think that's one of the things that the B2B marketers in next 2 to 3 years will have to look up for, because there will be an element of human interaction which will be required to build your trust, which will be required to build your scale, and which will be required to build that experience that we're talking about.
I think that's why there's a phrase which going around. I have also seen some screenshot that human to human, H to H, is a new thing which I have
It's
been seeing
Yeah,
on
yeah.
social
There are a lot of
media.
phrases.
Yes, yes. But also the fact that we live in instant gratification
Yeah,
era.
yeah.
That's why there's a lot of pressure on the marketeers to do this and that, because again, we are completely result driven. What you are bringing out of any
No, so
effort.
we have to be result driven. There's no choice
Yeah,
in it. But
yeah.
sometimes if and if we can bring some amount of method to the madness, I think the
Yes.
impact can be much better. See, in startup ecosystem, I have learned one thing: whatever marketing you do, think impact first. Correct? Do not think continuity first. ठीक है, that's the difference between startup and a bigger corporate. Correct? A bigger corporate might look at continuity because that brand is slightly more established. They need to increase their reach and frequency, and they want to be in the market for long. In startup, it's important that you create the impact so that you get value for money, correct? And that impact will be able to sustain your business for long, correct? So think impact first, and whatever it takes to build that impact, invest in it. Do not spend on it, invest in it, because once you invest, you continue to reap benefits.
Thank you so much for that particular insightful thought that startup has to look for impact and corporates continuity. So my next question is mostly for young people who might be watching this particular episode. Now, where should one go for the B2B marketing? Can it be self-taught?
I mean, it's not about B2B marketing. Marketing by itself is a self taught field, correct? And it starts with your own self, correct? Your own name is your brand, correct? And you have various facets attached to your name. You like to be known in a particular way, and or you're known in a different way in different groups, correct? So you are in your mind creating those segments and targeting for yourself, correct? It's just then you're implying and putting that in the form of the product, correct? So marketing is always a self-taught kind of a quality. Yes, it can be honed or it can be bettered with some courses, with some good mentors, with some good advices, with some good experiences that you get. But can marketing be ever be taught completely? Never, because marketing is all about observation. It's all about implementation. It's all about making those mistakes. It's all about creating that emotion and experience, and like you do in your own life, correct, where you do all of these things. You like to be in the various stages of your customer journey. That's your life cycle, correct? You have a different personality. You are known in a different way. That's how product goes, right? When it's product starting off, it's like a baby. It needs to be known and nurtured in a different manner, versus when it's more evolved phase, correct, when it's adult. It cannot be same. And like is the brand, it cannot be same, and marketing cannot be done the same way, correct? So it's a very I think it's a very self-taught phenomena, but better with help of the various courses and various stuff that's available in the market.
So, Samar, sorry, I'm going into the rapid round questions because I want as much information as possible from you, because this has been very enlightening and very rewarding also to learning about all these things. So, my
Yeah,
next question is basically on what has been your biggest learning in the industry, and what are the popular myths about B2B marketing?
that's a very interesting one. I mean, your biggest learning in the industry can come when you have hung up your boots and you're ready to say, "Okay, boss, these are the learning." But like I said, I'm also I'm in a phase of reinventing. Correct. So I've
Yeah.
forgotten all the learnings of the industry that I've come through. But yeah, whatever little uh, you know my biggest learning by being in the industry is learn to segregate between perception and perspective, and choose to prioritize what needs to be built more: perception about a brand or perspective about a brand, correct? It's extremely important for us to know that ये मेरे ब्रांड के बारे में ऐसा बोलना चाहिए या ऐसा सोचना चाहिए, correct? That's the starting point, and I think that's the biggest learning for me in the startup ecosystem, because you have to take a stance, correct? You cannot do everything because you have limited resources. The myths, and because of which the myths that I have seen being broken, and maybe some myths were also lying with myself. I also had a certain perspective about this segment, that B2B marketing focuses more on rational and less on emotional. I think it's completely, that line is blurring day in, day out. Nobody reads text on website. uh, I am very surprised that my long form my campaigns with long form content is actually delivering me better results than short form content. Naturally, it's because you may say it's a B2B, it's a more complex selling, but I still feel the decision making that's required in my product is not so complex versus some of the other B2B companies that are in the market. But the kind of content we have served and the kind of results we are getting, I think people do read uh, uh, the things that they want to read well. So we should not feel that B2B guys don't read, or they don't read the website well and all. I think that's one myth. Influencers are only for B2C marketing. Again, that's a myth that got broken. I think the B2B business, the want of trust is so high that influencers in certain fields like sports, art, play a very, very big role in this segment. And people should use very smartly. It's not about just putting an Instagram post or a LinkedIn post with an influencer, but how influencer will impact the end result is the game. Correct? Again, I'm using the word impact because everything that I do in B2B and in a startup ecosystem has to start with impact first. And I would like to reiterate that point, that think impact first. And the last, that B2B means boring to boring. Ideally, that's the myth, that B2B marketing is damn fascinating. I can challenge any good marketer that if they find it boring to explore this field and show the same results. I quite look at B2B in a very different way. There's a very, interesting Hindi phrase which I heard on one of the popular reality shows, that बात उसी की होती है जो जिसमें बात होती है. That's a B2B. Correct? Your businesses are so heavily product driven that there is enough of scope and meat for it to become a very, very popular brand. So we should not shy away from doing good brand initiatives on a B2B side.
समर आई थिंक मैं थोड़ा आपका जो इन्फ्लुएंसर्स को आपने मेंशन किया, बिकॉज अगेन इन्फ्लुएंसर मार्केटिंग इज रियली कैचिंग अप, बट I also see, and you must be also observing, that influencers is now being limited still now in terms of followers rather than being an authentic voice. And we see influencers talking about each and everything under the sun. So again, if you have to give one or two tips to any person who might be listening or who want to get into influencer marketing, what would you suggest to them?
So I have been part of a couple of influencer marketing programs. The biggest being in my last organization, that's AU Bank. We did a campaign with Amir Khan and Kiara Advani. Correct. Of course, they are brand endorsers, but I would say it's there. It was there with the intent of influencing, some sort of our objectives. Correct. And there's something interesting that event's coming up at Onsurity. So I'll be not be able to tell the name, but yeah, you see, there's a difference between both the things that we are looking at. When I was in my previous organization, I wanted the influencer to drive growth for me. Purely business was the objective on which my brand was getting built. Correct? And I wanted to make an impact in the market. Influencer marketing again is to create that impact, whether it's short term or long term. Correct? You get someone to create an instant impact. In the second case, that we are working with the influencer is to purely build confidence and trust, because we are a startup, we are starting off, we are a small baby. The role of influencer there is not to get me more likes, but the role of influencer there is to make me stand tall in front of my competition, in front of my customers, in front of my stakeholders. As the baby becomes teenager, it wants to explore a lot of things. That's where my previous brand was. It wanted instant results, like you say. People want to consume quick content, get quick results. In such a situation, when my product is quick and the intent of the consumer is quick, the role of influencer is to to reduce that gestation period, make the decision making quicker, because we all know people don't take decisions rationally, they take decisions emotionally. Correct? So the role of influencer changes basically the life of your business cycle or the product cycle. Very important to know that it is not only about likes and things. I mean, that's the last matrix. People are now stopping, that to be popularized. They're finally talking about content and the impact that content is making on the ROI.
And rightly meant, like for example, I'm also getting into more social behavior change. A lot of studies suggest that people are not take decision based on rational things, and it's completely impulsive, emotion based. So again, and that's why this whole nudge theory is also coming up now. How we can nudge people to do certain things, and their influencers and other props can play an important role.
It's a way, it's like I take always my inferences from sports. Everyone bats, right? But there's a difference when someone like Sachin bats and the rest bats. Correct? That's the impact of brand, that you have on the behavior of a human mind. Finally, everyone's watching cricket. Everyone's watching the batsman. Correct? But there's more excitement when a particular batsman comes, and lesser excitement when the other batsman comes. Correct?
Right.
It's not only his batting skills, but his persona around his, as a human. I think that's exactly the core of brands. We don't have to think about B2C, B2B, B2B2C, H2H, F2F. A lot of terms will come, but finally the core remains that what's your brand identity and how are you impacting the emotion.
Great. So I think I'm in the last end of my this marathon series of questions. So one, this is specifically on because uh, you have been working on Onsurity, and I also went through the website, read a lot about it. Uh, so why there's a focus on healthcare for startups and SMEs? And if you can also explain how Onsurity is addressing this and how big this challenge is right now.
Sure, I'll do that. There are three parts to this questions. Why this is important, correct? So for SMEs and startups, today talent pool is finite, and in most of the startups, particularly the tech startups, the talent pool is very, very expensive and finite. More than the expensive and finite part, the other part is that today if they're acquiring talent from bigger organizations, or they're getting the talent from bigger organizations, they are able to match the compensation part of it. But what the talent today is looking is beyond money, correct? They're looking for culture, they're looking for their wellness benefits, health and wellness benefits. They're looking for a lot of ancillary rewards besides just compensation. So getting your money paid is one thing, but to provide this compensation is extremely difficult. And that's where we stepped in. We are here to build a culture of progression around health and well-being products, correct? And that's where you're playing the critical role. Now, what is Onsurity doing? Correct. So one is that there's a need because organizations want to retain and acquire good talent, correct? And they want to be competitive with the bigger players. Now, the biggest differentiator there was the health. For example, today, if I have was part of a bigger corporate, I had all my health benefits or health covers included in my compensation package. But when you go to a smaller player, imagine you go to a player which is a consultancy of 10 people, correct, paying you very well, correct. But when you ask them that what are the health benefits I have, typically they will not have an answer, and there are reasons for it. Not because the intent is not to give, the intent is to give, but they do not have the access to those products. Two reasons for that. First is because they are usually serviced by a community, which is typically the broker community or the agent community. So whose business models do not allow them to go to smaller players, correct? The other is that they are usually left to buying retail health benefits, which are extremely expensive. It blocks their working capital for almost a year, because they have to pay in advance. At Onsurity, we identified all of these instances, and we came up with India's first employee health benefit program to be paid on monthly subscription basis. And we start at 145 rupees per month per employee, which is less than a cup of tea. If someone has every day, end up paying more. And to this extent, there we have been recognized as India's top 5 disruptors just a couple of days back on Hotstar Disney. So that's the kind of market we are addressing. There is a need which is enormous, and I'm very happy to say that 85% of my customers today, are first time to health. That means they're first time given a group employee health benefits for their teams, which is a matter of great privilege from us as a brand and us as a organization.
And I think maybe COVID also gave a time to also pause and reflect.
Absolutely. That just helped us. We are a COVID baby, correct? So we started Onsurity in 2020, which was the COVID year, correct? So our entire product development and experience has been kept in mind. The diversity and the geographic, diversities of India, as well as the expectations of consumers in various working lifestyles. Previously it was going to office. Now you work from home, work from vacations. A lot of work from terms have come up. Correct. We have to ensure we cater to all of these requirements of the end consumer, Eh, and that's again only possible because of use of tech. So this is where tech comes and plays the role that it has to play.
So, Samar, this is my last question,
So,
and I think, and before I ask this question, I would also like to highlight that, like, I have been also interacting with a lot of students and young
right,
professionals. So, one thing is that, earlier this was not even my conversation. When I started my career, I never asked about what benefits I would get. I was simply focusing on more about the salary, what I will get in hand. But these days, people ask about, okay, what is the culture, that kind of a thing. They need to understand because maybe the expectations have changed. We are now getting more, aware about the mental health, about the working culture, and that's why my next question is around that. That mental health and employee benefits are discussed a lot, but are still addressed a less in many of the organization. There are
correct.
a lot of discussion happening, but in terms of getting it addressed in an organization, I still find it very, very less. So, what is your advice, to some startups and small companies? Because corporates might have a lot of arms to do that, or maybe fund available to do that. How does a startup or small companies now can build this benefit culture as a long-term investment?
No, it's a very interesting, phase that we are going through. Because post COVID, like you said, people have realized the value of not only good health but also good mental health. Correct. Uh, as a startup or a small business, first thing that I would personally suggest is before you go and create, a culture, have your ammunition that we have a product ready for you now. You don't have to go and scout for a product which is your basic parameter to start a building of culture. Coming to the part of a culture around mental wellness, I think we are interacting with a lot of startups and a lot of SMEs these days where employees are getting very vocal about it. That's a good start. That's a good part about it. Correct. Do they have the right solutions in hand? Maybe not. Are companies more acceptable to it? Definitely yes. Is there a scope for building more engagement? 100%. Lot more scope. Correct. But one thing that I've seen, or one difference that I've seen between a larger corporate and a smaller startup is that I feel the threshold level of people now are slightly lesser in startup. And the reason for that is that uh, uh, you know they belong to a generation where their validation is extremely high. Requirement for validation is extremely high. Correct.
Agree.
And when you come to a corporate or a bigger corporate, sometimes you live your entire career on self validation that I know what I'm doing is right. Correct. Let the world tell what they have to tell. You become much more stronger. The will is much powerful. Correct. I think that transition needs to come in startup where they have to believe self. Correct. They have to believe that what they're doing is right. They need to talk to their friends and peers. If there's any issue, they usually, they refrain thinking that it could lead to insecurity kind of a situation, or it could lead to a lose of position, which I think sometimes hampers. It's a degrowth, rather than a value for growth. So my only advice is build your threshold. Every day that should be your aim. That how do I increase my threshold? Because while doing that, it automatically gives you more peace of mind. Correct. It gives you acceptance of reality. Correct. And in larger scheme of things, it builds a culture of lot of empathy, and helps businesses scale faster. Trust me when I'm saying this, it's people who make businesses, and I truly believe in that. Correct. So people need to understand their roles on self as well as for the organizations at large.
Thank you so much, Samar. And I think what you rightly mentioned, and maybe you might have also observed, we have also seen in the past 1 or 2 week, a lot of uproar happening on LinkedIn on the post, which we just discussed. It doesn't,
Right.
it ended not on a very good note. So that's a sad part, but I completely agree on the threshold part that we need to really increase our threshold.
Yeah, and I think it should not get affected too much by the social media stuff because everyone has their views. It's right, wrong, neutral, whatever it is. I think find stories for yourself. I think people have stopped finding stories for themselves. They want others to tell them the stories, which you can avoid. We can tell your own story, be your own self, and fight your way out. I think, I don't think so. It's so difficult and it's very enjoyable. Let me say that.
Yes, but again, the thing is that now there's so much of the FOMO has
Yeah,
happened because of social media.
correct.
People look for validation on social media, whether it's what posting, they're commenting.
It's not fear. I think I'll replace this with a word called GOMO, which is guilt of
Oh,
missing out. I
okay.
think it's more guilt, than fear. I think that generation doesn't get fearful of anything,
Hmm.
correct? But they
Yes.
get into that guilt zone very fast, and I think that's where I think people have opportunity and challenges both.
Thank you, Samar. I think we I almost taken your 45 minutes.
No,
It's
no,
one
it's
of the
lovely interacting.
quite
Hope I'm making sense
interesting
to the audience as well as to you.
and very interesting thoughts, and you have been very candid in your approach and the way you have shared your knowledge. And very love to keep doing this, and we hope that you keep writing about these also on your
Yeah,
LinkedIn
I'll do
profile.
that.
And I will strongly recommend each and everyone who is listening to this particular session do follow Samar for his insights on empathy, customer experience, startup, and how he's building a whole new organization, which basically talks about uh, health and well-being. Thank you, Samar, for joining in once
You
again.
know, thanks, Manish, and from me and the entire Onsurity team here, thank you so much for having us here and listening to us in whichever format way we could present ourselves. And we'll be
Yes,
more than happy. Any opportunity you have to work with us to make an impact on this SME and startup ecosystem in our individual capacity as well as in a professional capacity, we'll be more than happy to contribute on that. So thank you so much for giving us this
yes. So
platform.
I will discuss that offline with you.
Sure, sure.
How we can
Absolutely.
leverage that your knowledge, your insights in a different way altogether. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Thanks so much and
Bye bye.
have a
Have a
great,
good day.
great evening ahead. Yeah.